Okay, so I'm Louise Larson. I run August Consulting. I'm a college planning consultant. If you don't know me, I put together a monthly webinar starting in this past September, and it's been a lot of fun. And I never know, I don't know what I'm going to talk about in March, because I thought I would be talking about something different in February. And so many things have happened in the past couple of weeks in the college planning world that I just thought, boy, it's going to be kind of a little bit of a catch-all. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start talking, and happy to answer questions at the end. If I say something that isn't clear or doesn't make sense, feel free to jump in. But if you have paper and pencil and you want to write questions down, I'm happy to take those at the end. And let me just double check if anybody else trying to get in. No. Okay. So the first thing in the college admissions news is that the Supreme Court has agreed that they are going to hear the Harvard and UNC Chapel Hill affirmative action cases. Harvard won. They were sued by the Students for Fair Admissions in 2018 for using race-based quotas and considering race in admissions. And Harvard won that case, but the Students for Fair Admission has has challenged it. So it is going to be heard by the Supreme Court. The Harvard case in 2018 was actually very interesting because it did pull back the curtain on a lot of things that happened behind the scenes in admissions. So that is going on, and it should be interesting to see what they do. In 2016, the Supreme Court ruled that University of Texas Austin that their race-conscious admissions policies were lawful. So we'll see how that goes. In the Varsity Blues case, the final two parents were sentenced to 12 months and 15 months, respectively. And I've been getting a lot of high achieving younger 9th and 10th graders coming for meetings, and they say, how can I-get-in? And my answer is the only way to guarantee it is fraudulent. So that's not really what you want to do. You can't guarantee selective admissions. The other thing that you might hear bits about is the antitrust case for the 568 group. And you might think, what are you talking about? There's a statute that allows colleges that are need blind to qualify for limited antitrust exemption that allow common principles for assessing financial aid. I gotta try to mute people. Hold on a second. Whoever is unmuted, I'm not sure who that is. I think it's the Martinell number. Anyway, I'm gonna mute you. Okay, so if you're sitting here listening to me, the 568 antitrust case won't impact you that much. But what the antitrust case is that they're saying if you consider donors legacies and don't offer financial aid to your waitlist students, you can't call yourself need blind. So if you hear tidbits about that, just so you know what it is. The big news, the things that might impact a parent of a high school student right now are on January 25th, the College Board announced that the SAT will offer a digital version for the class of 2025. So we're talking about freshmen here. We'll have a different SAT structure. What does this mean? It's going to be digital. It's going from 3 hours to 2 hours. It is going to be adaptive. It's going to have 2 parts. So you will start a section of the English, and an algorithm on the second section will decide what questions you get. Same thing with the math. Ideally, it will be more secure. You will be allowed to use a calculator for the home math section. There will be shorter reading passages with 1 question per passage. There will be probably more flexible test dates, more school day test dates. You will get your scores faster. It will still be on a 1600 scale, and it will be math, English, they're not adding another subject area. This will be rolled out for the fall 2023 PSAT and then the SAT in 2024 for the class of 2025. If you're an international student, it will be available sooner. Okay, so what are the questions around this? Well, will the 10th grade PSAT, how's that going to work with National Merit Scholarships? Will there be a rush to test before this changed? Will people gravitate to the ACT? What about extended time? The College Board is not great at they might change this. There could be more news on this. I think that it is kind of a way to take the test optional movement and try to corral it back towards testing. They don't want to see a test free. I mean, if schools become test free, that's dollars out of the College Board's pockets. So they're trying to create something that will keep the testing movement going. So speaking of the test optional movement, just about every school is going to be test optional through 2023, except currently requiring test scores are the Florida Publics, Georgia Publics, and United States Air Force Academy and United States Merchant Marine Academy, not West Point and not Annapolis. I don't know why that is. The other big piece of news is that we're all familiar with the Common App. Perhaps some of you are familiar with the Coalition app. About, I don't know, 5 to 8 years ago, there was a big tech glitch with the Common App, and it was kind of a disaster for that application cycle. And a group put together a whole new application platform called the Coalition. If you have older children that have applied to college, you might have come across the Coalition application. There was a time, and I think like this past year, University of Washington only took the Coalition. So if you wanted to apply there, you had to do the Coalition. I think Maryland and Florida used to only be Coalition. So you might have come across the Coalition application. The Coalition application was probably dying like a slow sunset, was going kind of not going to be, it just wasn't really being used. So what happened was SCORE and SLATE and Coalition got together, and they have put together a whole new application platform that they are rolling out this summer. It's coming online in July. And if your school uses SCORE and you're applying to a school that accepts the Coalition application, you could use this platform. If you have a senior applying this year, this is going to be, if your student's school uses Naviance or doesn't use either SCORE or Naviance, it's not going to really be an option for you to use this. Your school has to be on SCORE. But if your school is on SCORE, you might be doing the Coalition, you might be doing the Common App. More remains to be seen about that, but it is a pretty big change from a platform that was really going away. And it was, now it's this whole new thing. So more remains to be seen about that. But if you do have a 9th, 10th, or 11th grader, this is something that could impact you, especially if your high school uses SCORE. So let's talk a little bit about some admissions nuts and bolts from the 2022 cycle, which is still going on and has been very dynamic, let's say dynamic. The first news is the University of California, Berkeley just announced that they are going to have to reduce their freshman student numbers by 3,050, which means they've got to accept, I think it was 5,000 less students to get to the proper numbers. So what's happening? Well, the town of Berkeley sued the school for overgrowth, for lack of a better word, saying that the school has grown too much too fast. Now, you might wonder, well, what have they done to grow? What's going on? They are 25% higher right now than they predicted for their 2005 long range plan. So what does this mean? So they are going to have to accept a lot less students in the freshman class this year. And this just came out. So this is for kids who have already submitted their applications, and they're, you know, it's going to be a challenge. The whole UC system around 2017, 2018, there was the California legislature took the UC system to task for taking too many out-of-state students. And in that admission cycle where students had already been admitted, the legislature made the University of California let in more California kids. So the next couple of years we're applying into a glut where there was like a possum and the python, less spots, because they've been forced not only to let more kids in that 1 year, but then a pressure to let more California kids in the next years. And so I think an out-of-state UC applicant is really, it's an uphill. That's going to be an uphill climb. I always say to my kids, if you want to apply to the UCs, get all your other applications done, and then we'll talk about maybe applying to the UCs. So the other thing that I'm seeing is a lot of recruiting to reject. And you might wonder, what is recruiting to reject? It's a selective schools emailing your child saying, hey, it's not too late, you could apply, we'd love to see your application. And it's very, these are very selective schools. When Georgetown sends you an application, an email saying we can't wait to read your application, that's a very inviting thing. But what that often is, and kids that I work with send me this stuff, I'm like, what is this? And they're wonderful kids, they've got lovely profiles, but they're probably going to be rejected in this ultra selective school. So the idea of recruiting to reject, I'm seeing a lot of that. To give you some context, Stanford, in a podcast that I was listening to, said 75% of their admissions pool is admissible. So, if they take 100 kids and 75 of them are admissible, they're picking 5. So the stakes at these really selective schools continues to be challenging, and it's important to have good context around that you might be a star at your school, but when you step into that really ultra selective pool, it's very, very challenging. More numbers to give some context around this admission cycle. If you have a senior, if you have a junior, it's worth just being aware of some of the shifts, and the shifts I think are around the pandemic and the test optional piece. I don't know what else to say that is doing this, but to give you some context, Denison is a smaller liberal arts college in Ohio, and last year they got 9,500 applications, and they accepted 28% of those students. So it's about 2,600 kids to get a freshman class of 550 to 600, say, ballpark. This year, they got over 12,000 applications. I mean, that's like a 1/3 increase, almost a 1/3 increase in applications at a school with 2,200 kids at it. So that becomes a lot more selective. University of Michigan, to give you some contrast around, Michigan and Denison are very different places. So University of Michigan, in 2020, they got 65,000 applications. In 2021, they got 79,700 applications. In this admission cycle, just in the early action round, they got 57,000 applications, just early action. So that's, those are big jumps. What has happened, and I had a couple of kids apply to Michigan in the early action round, and what happened, they got a letter saying, your decision has been postponed. Now, usually early action would either be admitted, deferred, or denied. They were called postponed. Their application wasn't even read, I don't think. Like, they're saying, we postponed a decision. It doesn't even mean a deferral. So, Michigan is admitting typically between 16 to 17,000 students. So these numbers, I don't know, I don't know why they're swinging so heavily, but they are. And I don't know except what to say about it, except is it test optional? Is it pandemic? Kids couldn't visit. They're sending applications out more than they might have before. I don't know exactly what is driving this, but that is something to be aware of, especially if you have a junior trying to target or reach target likely becomes a little more challenging. Even if you thought you were a good candidate at Denison based on last year's data and said, okay, I'm going to apply to Denison, that could be a nice school for me, and it's a realistic, target or likely for me. That changed even, since you've applied. You didn't know that Denison was going to have such a massive increase in applications. What I'm seeing is a lot of yield protection. So yield protection, colleges want to admit kids that they think will come. They want to have the most amount of their accepted pool say yes to them. I mean, that's what yield is. And I see a lot of yield protection from schools that I didn't used to see it. The University of Vermont was deferring kids left and right, and to stay in the regular decision pool, you have to write another essay on like why you want to go to the University of Vermont. I saw the similar type of yield protection at schools like Auburn and University of South Carolina, that the kids that they would have taken any other year were deferred, and they want to see if you want to stay. I don't know exactly what they're doing. I don't know if they've run out of time to read applications. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but I'm definitely seeing a much more chaotic set of decisions. I was on a professional feed with people saying, tell your craziest admissions, what's your craziest admissions cycle right now, where, the most surprising thing where like your kid got turned down at Michigan, but like, got into Vanderbilt, or, it was like, it's very hard to predict what is going to happen. So from that standpoint, I think that I think it's just increasingly challenging to make a list and have a sense of like, okay, this is going to work. We have a range of schools, and my student can be happy at them all. I'll talk a little bit more about how to handle that. The other thing I want to say, this is kind of shifting gears about world language study, and this is not me as a world language teacher promoting this. There was an article in the Washington Post about Temple and the class that they brought in from their current freshman class that they brought in from the 2021 application cycle. And they said, we paid more attention to cultural competence and favored students who did not fail on a world language their senior year. That's important to know. A lot of kids don't realize like, oh, great, I can drop a language after junior year and take something else that's more interesting to me. And I understand that, but sometimes a world language, a fourth year of a world language can be a game changer in a college prep curriculum. So I always say it, I tell my kids, you got to take, I tell them in 10th grade, like when they're in Spanish too, don't forget you're taking that your senior year too. So that's just something to be aware of. There's a guy named Matt Reed. He writes a blog for Inside Higher Education, and I always enjoyed his blog. And then about 5 years ago, he was like a community college. He was working at a community college in Massachusetts, and he 5 years ago ended up getting a job at the community college near where I live. And he still writes his blog, and then he's writing about, the Brookdale Community College, and he writes about all sorts of stuff. And he's written about his two children and their application process. So he's got a son that's at the University of Virginia, and he's got a daughter that's a senior. And he wrote an amazing piece on holistic admissions, saying they really shouldn't call it anymore. They should be calling it like casting, because they do look at the holistic child, but they also are trying to like fill pieces of a mosaic. And he wrote a really nice piece about how it's really kind of you're being casted. You're not being holistically evaluated. So the question becomes, when you hear all this and, what do we do here? How do you manage if you have a junior and you are trying to guide them and help them and figure out what do we do to move forward with some confidence and some peace and all that kind of stuff. And I think that the only thing left to do is to really lean into your authentic interests, the things that you really like, the things that you want to do, and build your activities and interests and what you like to do around that. Because there's no guarantee, like when I have a little 9th or a 10th grader who's working so hard and doing so well and saying, how can I get in? And there is no magic formula. So I always say to kids, if you are doing interesting, authentic things, 9th, 10th, 11th grade, when it comes time to write essays for the summer before 12th grade, you will have interesting, authentic things to write about. So I think it becomes a question of, in this climate of just, it's very dynamic, it's very unpredictable, the decisions don't always make a lot of sense, to really be doing what you want to do, and always to be building a list of schools that you love. And that, we've an embarrassment of collegiate riches in this country. We've got thousands of schools, and you just keep going till you've unearthed enough, 3 reaches, 3 targets, 3 likely schools. I think that's the only way that I can advise the students that I work with to move forward. I have put together on Facebook a group called Two River College. I don't even remember what it's called now. I can't remember. Two River College something. I'll tell you in a second. And what I wanted to do was create a place for people to gather, to just be able to get Two River College admissions. That's what I called it. Anyway, I put some of the articles that I referenced here on there, and just kind of a place to stockpile articles. So if you're curious about anything that I cited here, some of it's already on there, and the rest I'm going to put on there. So feel free, if you're on Facebook, to ping me on that, and I'm happy to let you in and see some of this stuff. I don't think I had anything else that I really wanted to go over tonight. So now, does anybody have any questions that they want to ask about anything that I said or what to do? I see a hand up. Whoever's got their hand up, just unmute and go ahead and jump in.
Oh, hi, Louise. This is Karen. How are you?
Good.
So question, like you were talking about this, huge increase in applications at like schools ranging from Michigan to Denison. And in the end, right, like the kids can only choose one school. So is the sort of end game of this that it's kind of becoming more of a like play the wait list game? Like,
well,
because the kids can only go one place, you know what I mean? Like,
I thought for sure, and I guessed that because that the numbers jumped so much last year, that the wait list would be a big game, and the wait list is a domino. If Princeton pulls a kid off the wait list, the whole thing starts to move down, through the different types of schools. And I was wrong. I did not see a lot of wait list movement. But all of this stuff, Karen, the admissions numbers, the application numbers, the wait list numbers, it is a little bit like the stock market. Just because they did that last year doesn't mean that's what's going to happen this year. I had a kid text me Friday night saying, I got waitlisted at this school. And I said, okay, let me pull up some data. And I pulled up like 5 years data. And it was, sometimes I'll pull up like 5 years data on the wait list, and it's a range of like 11 to 300 kids got in off the wait list. This was a big state flagship, and it was like 8, 11. 1 year later, they let in 100, but like they're taking thousands of kids on the wait list. Like I have some numbers here. Michigan, in 2020, Michigan got 65,000 applications, admitted 16,974, waitlisted 20,000 kids. I mean, they waitlisted more kids than they admitted. They waitlisted more, triple the freshman class. Like, I don't know. So wait lists are fickle. Admissions pools are fickle. It could change. If you have a junior, when they finish their 2023 cycle, it could be like, hey, you know what? Those numbers weren't what 21 and 22 experienced. It pulled back like the tide. I don't know. Did that answer your question, Karen?
Like a little bit, but like I'm still kind of wondering, like, then if all the applications are up so many different places, are there more kids applying? Because in the end, the kids can only go one place.
I don't think that there's more kids applying. I think there's kids applying
Right.
to more schools, which is why I thought 2022 would be a big waitlist movement year, and it
Right.
just wasn't. If anything, there were some pretty selective schools. I remember, I think it was BC put out a little notice like, thank you all so much. We will not be going to the wait list this year. Now, BC would be a classic type of waitlist school where somebody maybe got the nod from Notre Dame or Georgetown and they pull out of BC and somebody, up the food chain. So I just think that I don't have an answer. I know it's counterintuitive, but I'm telling you, there was no big waitlist movement last year that you might have thought there would have been. Could this year be different? Could. I mean, we don't even have, it's not even March. We don't have a whole slew of schools' regular decision numbers yet. So there's a lot more to be seen from this 2022 cycle, but it is surely a little unpredictable, more so than usual already.
Thanks.
Any other questions? No? All right. Okay, so what I'm going to do at this point then, I think I'm going to stop the recording and